Welcome to For the Record. I'm Shannon Perrine. This morning, we are just days away from the 2024 primary election here in Pennsylvania. Local, statewide, and national races on the ballot. So we want to help make sure you're ready before heading to the polls on Tuesday. Today, we're talking with the Allegheny County Election Office and hearing from a political expert. Another election day here in the Keystone State, just days away, and election officials in Allegheny County say they are ready.
Our polling place recruitment team has done an excellent job for this election. We are fully staffed. We have, I think it's 6,875 confirmed poll workers to work on election day.
And they say we won't have to wait too long to learn the outcomes.
Last election, when we were inundated with mail-in ballots, it did take us longer, but we will be finished election night.
And a law professor and political expert weighs in on what candidates need to do in a crowded primary.
The candidates are really going to have to do a lot to make sure that they stand out among the five or the two in their competition. Because with so many names, there's more options against you.
Plus, why all eyes and big bucks could be on another Pennsylvania race with national implications. The
United States Senate is very, very close in its partisan balance, and so whoever wins this race for Pennsylvania may determine the balance of power in the Senate going forward.
And looking at the big one, the race for the White House, what both parties and candidates need to do before November and the general election. During any election, we want to see how organizers are preparing to not only staff the polling locations, but also count our votes. Michelle Wright sat down with the manager of the Allegheny County Division of Elections to check in to see how they're feeling just days out.
Joining us now is David Boyd, the Allegheny County Elections Division Manager. Let's start out with turnout. What are you expecting? What have you seen so far with early voting?
Early voting, we have about 120,000 voters that applied to vote by mail for this election. It's hard to compare to the last presidential. Last presidential, we had probably double that amount, but you have to remember we were in the midst of COVID as well.
So you can't really determine how we're doing at this point with
not really, but I
turnout.
think it's going to be a little lower due to the fact that, for the most part, the presidential primaries are locked up.
Sure. Right. Let's talk about the last election, the last presidential election. A lot of people expressed concern about possible fraud. Let's go over that a little bit. What is Allegheny County doing to prevent anything like that?
So there aren't any known cases of fraud in Allegheny County. I mean, we take this very seriously. We make sure that every vote that is cast, that every vote is counted and counted correctly.
Has there been any complaints so far about that?
No.
Nothing has come up yet. I also wanted to ask you about the date of the election. It's the first day of Passover, and I know that you're making some arrangements around the first day of Passover. So what message do you have about that?
So we would encourage voters that cannot vote because of Passover to vote by mail. We did have to relocate 16 polling locations, primarily in Shadyside and a couple on Mount Lebanon, due to the fact they wouldn't let us use them for Passover. So we temporarily moved them, and they will be moved back for November, but the polling places will be open. But if you can't make it to your polls, we would encourage you to vote by mail.
How are you alerting people whose polling place has changed?
So every household that their polling location has changed, we send them a notification telling them where the new location is, and we also post signage at the old location. If somebody would happen to go to the wrong location, they're informed of where to go.
Okay, that lets everybody know. Let's talk about those mail drop-off locations. Talk about the security and making sure that these drop-off locations are secure.
So these are just drop-off locations. You cannot vote. You can drop off your voted ballot. We have 4 full-time staff at each one, at least 2 people guarding the ballot box at all times. We have security by county police. All these facilities are on camera, which ties into our camera system in our warehouse. They are secure. The ballot boxes are locked and sealed with tamper-evident seals, and they are taken back to our warehouse nightly with county police.
You talked about staffing. Can you describe the situation when it comes to staffing polling locations on Election Day?
So our polling place recruitment team has done an excellent job for this election. We are fully staffed. We have, I think it's 6,875 confirmed poll workers to work on Election Day, and that's at least 5 for each one of our 1,327 polling locations.
And that's enough?
That's enough.
You're satisfied with that? Let's talk about counting ballots now. The process, when a mail-in ballot is received, what happens first?
The first thing is we scan the barcode that's on the outer envelope. What that does, that updates the SURE system. That's our list of registered voters. And it also, if you applied for a mail-in ballot and you provided an email address, you'll get a notification that we received your ballot. Once that is done, we verify that the outer envelope is signed and correctly dated.
And the correct date has always been kind of tricky for some people in the past. Some people might mistakenly put their birthday. What date do you want on there?
So the first date that we started mailing ballots was April 1st. So anything dated prior to that or after the current date, we have to send it back and let the voter cure it.
And so let's talk about that. So if they do make a mistake on the date, and the date is the date you're mailing it in, right?
The date you sign it,
That's the actual
yes.
date you sign it and mail it in. But if you make a mistake on that, you mail it back to the person without opening up the ballot.
We do not open any ballots until Election Day. They remain sealed. But any voter that fails to sign, fails to date, or incorrectly dates, we mail the ballot, unopened ballot, back to the voter with instructions on how they cure their ballot and how to return it.
So we don't do any counting of the ballots before Election Day. That's when you start opening them.
We're not permitted to start counting until 7 a.m. on election morning.
All right. And so what is counted first? Mail-in ballots, in-person voting, or does that happen simultaneously?
No, in-person are not counted until the polls close. So when they're updated on our website, normally start around 9 or 9:30.
That's right.
But the mail-in ballots were permitted to start our pre-canvass at 7 a.m. on election morning. That's when we re-verify that they're signed and dated correctly before we start opening them and unfolding them and counting them.
How many of those mail-in ballots do you expect to count?
We mailed out 120,000. I expect that there will probably be, by election day, there'll be 100,000 in. I think right now we're hovering around 56 or 57,000 ballots returned.
That's a lot of counting, isn't it? So you said that if somebody does something wrong on that outer envelope, they get it back with a chance to correct it before it's counted.
That is correct.
In one of the last elections, we were able to watch the votes being counted in your warehouse. Will we be able to do that again?
Yes, that is available.
You have cameras?
We have many cameras in our warehouse, and we have observer locations and a media location where we flash, what's going on in the vote counting up on our large screen televisions.
So here's the big question. Once everything is done, how long before we'll know a winner? Do you think that all the counting will be done by Election Day? I know in the past that we've covered it a few days out as the counting continues.
So last election, when we were inundated with mail-in ballots, it did take us longer, but we will be finished election night.
So we can expect to know how everything stands on election night.
They're still unofficial, but we'll know how they stand.
Still ahead on For the Record.
The United States Senate campaign is going to be probably one of the most competitive and most expensive in the country this year. So we should expect to see a lot from Casey and McCormick as they try to duke it out.
A political expert on what's at stake on the Pennsylvania ballot in 2024. Welcome back to For the Record. The biggest names you'll see on your ballots on Tuesday are Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But there are also other races here in the Keystone State this year that could have a big impact nationally. Janelle Hall spoke with political analyst Dr. Kristen Kupe to get her take.
Joining me now is Dr. Kristen Kupe, Director of Pre-Law at Duquesne University. Always great to have you with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice to have your perspective when it comes to the election and politics. What do you think are some of the big races and key issues in this election?
I mean, definitely the presidential campaign is usually what people choose to go out and participate in the most. But as of right now, the presidential candidates are pretty much locked down for the Republican and Democratic primaries. And so people might be looking down ballot to see if there's any races that are interesting to them. We do have a competitive attorney general race in Pennsylvania this year. The entire Pennsylvania House is up for re-election. But generally, these aren't races that really entice people to go out and participate. So the primary might have a little bit of a depressed turnout just because there's not much to vote on in some people's eyes. But it's still really important for choosing general election candidates, figuring out who are going to be the major party nominees in November, when we should expect turnout and participation to tick up a little bit.
And who will represent us ultimately in these
Absolutely.
positions. Anything surprising you leading up to the primary?
Not really. I mean, Pennsylvania's primary is a little bit later in the season in terms of the presidential campaigns. There are some competitive congressional campaigns, but really we haven't seen that much from the candidates themselves or even their challengers. I can't really think of anything too notable that's standing out to me about these congressional campaigns. The Senate, the United States Senate campaign, is going to be probably one of the most competitive and most expensive in the country this year. So we should expect to see a lot from Casey and McCormick as they try to duke it out, because just like with the Pennsylvania legislature, the Senate, the United States Senate, is very, very close in its partisan balance. And so whoever wins this race for Pennsylvania may determine the balance of power in the Senate going forward.
That's what I was going to ask you, why you think so many dollars are going, likely from even outside of Pennsylvania, knowing the implications.
Absolutely, and that's one of the big reasons. Controlling the chambers give the parties the power. And when you have a potential party change in the presidency, with the House and the Senate being so close in their partisan balance, and with how much sort of chaos and turmoil there is in the House of Representatives, the parties really need to make sure that they're maintaining or gaining in their presence in these chambers. Any loss could be really detrimental to their power, their agenda, the policies that they try to get through, how much, inter-party and inter-branch fighting there is over the next couple years. And so not only are the parties, but other, as you mentioned, outside groups are really interested in getting their candidates elected, promoting their agenda, making sure that their policy issues are on the forefront so that the other party doesn't have control and say over what goes on.
Which all boils down to more commercials
More
that we see,
commercials.
more ads, I should say,
Yes.
Throughout Western PA and across the state. So we were talking about the Attorney General race. Right now, 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans. This seat can also be a stepping stone often to become the next governor in Pennsylvania. How do you think more names on the ballot affect this kind of election when it comes to, so many choices for voters?
Well, in the primary, when you have a lot of people competing for one spot to go on in the November election, that sort of means a dilution of the votes. And so the candidates are really going to have to do a lot to make sure that they stand out among the 5 or the 2 in their competition, because with so many names, there's more options against you. And so if there were only 1 or 2 candidates, it would be a lot more competitive. But having one maybe strong challenger to the leading candidate can really dilute a lot of the votes away. So we'll see how that ends up turning out. But that means even more for those candidates to get out, spend money, make connections with the public, get their name out there. Because as you said, this is a stepping stone. It's an office for ambitious office seekers. We saw that with Josh Shapiro. And so it's not surprising that this is a really competitive election.
So when we talk about ballot curing, explain for some people who might not understand what that is. What is that, and have any rules changed with regard to that?
So that's just the term for trying to get the ballots ready to be processed. The state legislature creates the rules that set when the ballots can be open, what specifically has to be done with the ballot. So if you have a mail-in ballot, you'll notice there are very specific instructions as to how to fill it out, where to sign it, what to write on it, which envelope to put it in first, which envelope to put it in second, where to mail it, how to drop it off, or things like that. And so just being, there was a lot of controversy with this in previous elections because it seemed to take a great deal of time to get our ballots open and read and counted. And that's because election officials really aren't able to open their ballots until late on election day and get them ready to be counted. And so with the mail-in ballots, I don't see it being as much of an issue in the primary election, but it's definitely something to think about in November, especially with all the challenges to the idea of even mail-in voting to begin with. Just making sure that if you do have a mail-in ballot, you read the instructions and fill it out correctly so that your vote is counted, and it will be counted, just maybe not in the timely manner that you want, just because of the rules that are still in place right now.
Our conversation with Kristen Kupe continues when For the Record returns right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. Our conversation with Duquesne law professor Dr. Kristen Kupe continues now. We asked her about campaign spending and the race for the White House, and also the issues driving people to the polls at this moment in history.
So let's talk about advertising and campaign spending. We mentioned about the ads and that we see on the commercials. What races do you think are spending the most right now? Which ones are we really seeing a lot of on TV?
Absolutely. I think it's the Casey McCormick Senate race. Even though it's the primary, we kind of expect those to be the two big names there, especially with Casey as the incumbent. There's a lot of money, not only from the parties, but from outside groups, super PACs, and things like that, trying to shore up support for their candidates. And so that'll probably be one of the races, for right now at least, that we see a lot of money being put into. But I'm sure as time passes, once we get past the primary, we're definitely going to see a lot of money put into the presidential race. So we'll see many more Trump ads, many more Biden ads. And the yard signs will come out in full force when they're able to over the next couple weeks and months. So be on the lookout for everything.
Speaking of the race for the White House, we know that both Biden and obviously Trump, they've both held this seat before. Overall, what are your thoughts on what could happen in November?
It's a really long way off. And I think for right now, we need to kind of expect the unexpected. There is so much going on in not only the world, but within the campaigns. You have the start of former President Trump's trial in New York happening. And so we don't know what the outcomes of those are going to be. We don't know what the outcomes of any of his legal issues are. We have to see just kind of how things are shaking up. We've seen Biden kind of tightening up the polling, so he's running a little bit closer to Trump, but we still have a long time and a lot can happen over the next couple months. But really, I think what the parties need to do and the candidates themselves is they need to get the electorate excited to go out and vote for them. These are, just from talking to people and hearing discussion, these are not two candidates that people are really gung-ho for. They are not excited to vote for them. We see in a lot of the other primaries, people are voting for different candidates or writing in a different name or word to kind of show their protest for some of the candidates. And so both Biden and Trump will need to get out and activate their base. And voters need to realize also that these are the two choices. You can protest, but if you want your voice to be heard, you should pick the candidate that better aligns with you, regardless of your personal feelings towards them, which is easy to say, but not easy to do.
What do you think are some of the key issues driving people to the polls? We hear a lot about reproductive rights. We hear a lot about election security, the border wall, the economy, safety.
All of those things.
Yeah.
And it really depends on the issues that each of the candidates could actually have some impact on. The abortion rights are a huge state level issue right now with what we've seen out of Arizona in the last few weeks. And so anything from the war in Israel and Gaza to now what's going on with Iran trying to strike back. The economy, inflation, that's always going to be one of the #1 issues because people feel that the most. They vote with their pocketbooks. And so if there's no feeling that Joe Biden is doing more to improve the economy by November, people might look back to Donald Trump and hope that he would be a better alternative. But I definitely think reproductive rights and the issue of abortion is going to be a huge driver and motivator for people that are interested in that issue. And especially at the state level, when we talk about politics being local, many of those decisions are being made by state legislatures. And so, when you have, like in Pennsylvania, we have the entire Pennsylvania House up for re-election and part of the Senate That means there could be really big implications for these kinds of policy issues if the seats are close or even if there's a change in the partisan control.
Some races that people might not typically pay attention to or may ignore or not find the importance in, those are examples of things that they would ultimately be making the decisions about.
Absolutely. I mean, the states actually control a lot of the things that people feel most directly affected by. It's just a lot easier to attribute blame or success to a president, a singular figure, or Congress, which is highlighted much more often than what goes on in state politics.
Any last minute thoughts? The balance of power in Harrisburg is also, a huge issue, just as you were talking about.
Right. So I think definitely these state candidates need to get out, and just like Biden and Trump will have to do in the fall, they need to motivate their voters too. But a lot of these state races are not competitive. We see a lot of people running unopposed, and where there are challengers, if you do have an incumbent and a challenger in your district at home, really think about who is going to benefit you the most and how this is going to affect the state and the policies that are coming out. And how it's going to impact your life. That's really what voting is about, is picking the people that you think are best to run the state, your government, and your country, and what's going to be best for you and the nation as a whole.
You're watching For the Record, and we're back right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. A reminder for voters before you head to the polls, For the Record profiled 15 candidates on the ballot for the primary. You can watch those right now on WTAE.com and our mobile app. And you can also re-watch this episode or any episode with the Very Local app on your smartphone, your tablet, or smart TV. Plus, if you have a topic you'd like us to address, send us an email to news@WTAE.com. Thanks for joining us, and have a great week.